If you're someone who believes dogs just bark for no reason, this story will change everything you thought you knew. It started with one low growl, just one, but it was enough to save a child's life and expose a secret that had been buried for far too long. At Brookside Elementary, nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Indiana, nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary. Parents picked up their kids on time. Teachers smiled like they meant it. And if you asked anyone who the kindest soul on campus was, 9 out of 10 would say, "Oh, that would be Mr. Harris, the janitor." He always had a gentle wave, a spare Band-Aid in his pocket, and a bucket that squeaked charmingly down the hallways. But on a Tuesday morning in early November, everything about Mr. Harris's charm cracked wide open. It started when Officer Leah Monroe arrived at Brookside with her newly certified canine partner, Axel, a 3-year-old sable German shepherd with a record of sniffing out both danger and deceit. Leah had been stationed at bigger schools before, and Brookside was supposed to be a quiet assignment, just part of the county's Safe Schools initiative. But Axel had other ideas. From the moment Axel stepped paw onto the linoleum tiles of Brookside, he was alert. Too alert. His tail didn't wag, his ears never softened, and by the end of the first week, he had developed a strange fixation, the janitor's closet. Every time they passed it, which was often since it sat right outside the nurse's office, Axel would stop, stare, sniff, and growl, not loud, not aggressive, but deliberate, controlled, like he was certain something was wrong. Leah tried to brush it off. Might be cleaning chemicals, she told herself. Strong smells. Dogs can overreact. She even mentioned it in passing to Mr. Harris once, laughing, as she tugged gently at Axel's leash. But Mr. Harris didn't laugh. His eyes darted to the closet for a brief second, and he forced a smile. Dogs just get funny around bleach. My old lab used to go nuts when I mopped. That answer might have passed, but 2 days later something changed. It was Thursday, right before lunch. The halls were full of chatter. Kids were lined up. Then Axel froze. His nose lifted, his hackles rose, and in one fluid motion he lunged toward the janitor's closet. Teeth bared and growled deeper than ever. Leah yanked him back just in time. The leash tightened. Axel barked once, not a random bark, a warning bark, the kind he'd only used once before, during a domestic abuse call months back when a child was hiding in a crawl space. Mr. Harris came running down the hall seconds later, wiping his hands on a rag. "Whoa there! What's the matter, buddy?" he asked, his voice high-pitched and tight. Leah straightened, eyes narrowed. "That's the 3rd time he's reacted like this, Mr. Harris. What do you keep in that closet?" Mr. Harris chuckled, but this time it didn't land right. "Mops, bleach buckets, janitor stuff." Leah wasn't convinced, and clearly neither was Axel. "Mind if I take a quick look?" she asked casually, already walking toward the door. Mr. Harris's hand moved fast. "Oh, actually, I was just about to mop up a spill in the boys' room. Can I get back to you in 5? But Leah had already seen it. The padlock on the closet door. Not a simple push latch. A full-on metal padlock that hadn't been there 2 days ago. She didn't say a word. Just made eye contact and placed a quiet call to dispatch for a school resource officer and a 2nd unit. Mr. Harris's smile faltered. If this story is already pulling you in, don't forget to hit subscribe to our YouTube channel, Heroes, for animals. Stories like Axel's, true, brave, and life-changing, deserve to be told, and your support keeps them alive. Back inside the main hallway, the school staff had started to notice the tension. The principal, Mr. Graham, approached. Leah cautiously. "Everything okay?" Leah kept her voice low. "We've had multiple alerts from my canine near the janitor's closet. I'm requesting a search." The principal hesitated. "You think Mr. Harris?" "I think my dog thinks something's wrong. That's enough for me." By the time backup arrived, Mr. Harris was gone. Vanished. Security footage later showed him leaving out the rear staff exit 5 minutes earlier, carrying a mop and rolling his bucket. It looked normal, until you noticed the bundle tucked under the mop rags. something the size of a duffel bag. But this part of the story and what they found inside that janitor's closet, that's where things took a turn no one saw coming. When Officer Leah and Axel finally opened the door, the chemical smell was overpowering. But it wasn't bleach that made Axel bark again. It was the cold air, the trapdoor beneath the mop shelf, and the set of small, muddy footprints leading down. Leah's flashlight shook slightly as she aimed it downward. "Axel, stay close," she whispered. They descended the stairs together, step by creaking step, hearts pounding. And at the bottom, in a small, dim room with no windows, one mattress and empty food wrappers, was a boy, curled up, silent, eyes wide open but not blinking, aged about 8 or 9. His hair was tangled, his clothes worn, and beside him, in a trembling hand, he held a laminated school ID badge. It read, Evan Morales. Grade 3. Missing since August. Evan Morales didn't flinch when the flashlight hit his eyes. He didn't cry out or move away when Officer Leah crouched down, calling his name softly. He just sat there motionless like a photo that had been forgotten in a dusty album. Axel, the K9, inched closer, his tail low, his movements slow and calculated. He let out a soft whine and placed one paw forward. That was when Evan blinked. Just once, but it was enough to tell Leah what she needed to know. This boy is still in there. Somewhere inside, he's still holding on. Leah kept her voice even. "Evan, my name is Officer Monroe. This is Axel. You're safe now." The boy's hands shook as he dropped the school ID badge. The corners bent from being clutched too long. He didn't speak. But when Axel laid his head gently on Evan's knee, the boy exhaled a breath so long it sounded like a lifetime had been trapped inside him. Leah radioed for emergency medical response, but even as she did, her mind raced. How long had he been down here? There was food, canned peaches, expired crackers, an empty water jug, a thin mattress, even a calendar with days crossed off in red pen. But no light, no toys, no warmth, just survival. Upstairs, the mood had shifted. The entire school had gone into a controlled lockdown once they realized Mr. Harris was gone. The faculty was shaken, parents were being notified, and a handful of detectives were combing through every locker room and file connected to the janitor they had once trusted with their children's safety. Principal Graham, white-faced and trembling, stood near the nurse's office, whispering into his phone. "How could we have missed this?" he kept asking, over and over again. The police found evidence in Mr. Harris's small campus apartment, drawings, surveillance notes, and even clothing items that didn't belong to him. He had been planning more. Evan, they believed, wasn't his first attempt, but he was the first one Axel got to in time. Evan was taken to the local hospital. He didn't say a word for the first 48 hours. Doctors called it trauma mutism, common in children who've faced prolonged emotional abuse or isolation. But despite the silence, Evan didn't resist when Axel visited his hospital room. He didn't turn away when the German Shepherd curled beside his bed. In fact, he seemed calmer whenever Axel was there, like the dog's very presence created a safe space no human could replicate. Leah visited daily, sometimes bringing books or puzzles, but she always brought Axel. One afternoon, 4 days after the rescue, something changed. Axel dropped a soft plush toy by Evan's side, a tiny stuffed German Shepherd wearing a police vest. Leah smiled, about to explain what it was, when Evan reached out and hugged the toy tightly. Then he whispered, barely audible. He growled, "So they would find me." Leah froze. It was the first time she had heard his voice. She kneeled down beside the bed. "Axel knew something was wrong," she said softly. "He never gave up on you." Evan looked at the dog and nodded once. Then, he whispered again, "He's a good boy." The media exploded. Missing boy found in school basement. K9 officer uncovers secret room beneath elementary. Hero dog saves child from unthinkable situation. But Leah didn't care about the headlines. What mattered was that Evan was alive, that Axel had done what no one else could, trusted his instinct, even when humans ignored him. The community held a candlelight vigil that weekend. Hundreds gathered in front of Brookside Elementary. Parents, students, teachers, some holding posters with Evan's picture, others holding signs that read "Thank you, Axel," and "Justice for Evan." Mr. Harris was still at large, but the FBI had joined the search. And with the evidence recovered, they were confident it was only a matter of time. Leah stood at the back of the crowd, Axel at her side, as a little girl approached with a handmade card. "Is this the hero dog?" she asked. Leah smiled. "He sure is." The girl handed her the card. Inside was a drawing of a boy in a basement and a big dog with a heart on his vest. Underneath it, she'd written in crayon, "Some angels have paws." Back at the hospital, Evan had started speaking more. Slowly, carefully. His first full sentence came when a therapist asked him if he wanted to stay in town or go somewhere else. He glanced at Leah, then at Axel, and said, "Can I stay near the dog?" It wasn't long after that Evan was placed into a temporary foster home with a kind older couple who had once fostered trauma victims. They were gentle, patient, and, thanks to a generous grant from the local sheriff's office, able to afford dog-assisted therapy sessions twice a week. And yes, Axel was allowed to be there. Leah and Axel visited often. She'd show Evan how Axel trained, how he obeyed silent commands, how he could sniff out even a thumbtack in a field. Evan would laugh, an actual laugh, when Axel did his signature bow and spin trick. One day, as Leah packed up to leave, Evan tugged gently at her sleeve. "Officer Monroe? Yeah, kiddo? If I get big and strong again, can I be a dog cop too?" Leah smiled, her heart full. "You'd make a great one, Evan." He looked at Axel, thoughtful. "Can I ride with you sometimes?" "We'll see. First, you gotta promise me something." "What?" "Promise you'll keep healing. And promise you'll never stop listening. To your gut. Even when adults don't." Evan nodded. That's what Axel did. Exactly. That night, Leah sat on her front porch, Axel curled at her feet, the moonlight washing over them both. She thought about how close they'd come to missing everything. How close the world came to losing a little boy no one realized was still alive. How a growl, just one, had changed the course of a child's life. Axel lifted his head and looked at her. No words needed. She patted his fur. "Good boy," she whispered. "You saved him." The FBI profiler had said it best. Guys like him don't just vanish, they blend. That was the thing about Randall Harris, better known as Mr. Harris to the staff and students of Brookside Elementary. He didn't stand out. He wasn't flashy, loud, or ever the type to make the news. Until he did. It had been over 2 weeks since he disappeared after the discovery of Evan Morales in the underground room. The city of Brookside had transformed from a peaceful suburb to a community on edge. Parents were pulling their kids from school. Neighborhood watches doubled in size. Every white utility van that drove by a playground made someone squint twice, and still, no Harris. Leah Monroe, now working with federal agents, sat in a joint task force briefing room staring at a corkboard lined with maps, photos, and sticky notes. Axel lay at her feet, eyes half closed but ears alert. "We've tracked his credit cards, nothing," said Agent West, a tall man with an impatient jawline. "Bank accounts are cold. His Social Security's been dormant since the day he ran." Leah shook her head. He was a planner. Everything about that basement was calculated. He had food rations, an escape plan, even a way to monitor hallway traffic with hidden microphones. He didn't vanish. He prepared. "And that," said another agent, "makes him more dangerous than anyone we've ever chased." The public pressure was growing fast. The story had gone national. News stations from coast to coast were showing security footage of Harris in his janitor uniform, wheeling a mop bucket and carrying a duffel bag, his last known movements. Online forums buzzed with conspiracy theories. Some said he'd escaped to Canada. Others swore he'd changed his appearance and was hiding in plain sight. But there was one lead nobody expected. It came from Texas. A retired middle school teacher named Carol Higgins emailed the FBI tip line after watching a segment on the news. She didn't write much. Just this. The man in your footage looks an awful lot like someone I worked with in Austin. Name wasn't Harris then. Went by Alan Tate. He left in the middle of the year after a few disciplinary issues that were never made public. I always felt something was off about him. The FBI dug into it immediately. Turns out Randall Harris had a string of fake identities going back nearly 20 years. Always working around kids. Always moving when things got uncomfortable. Worse, records of internal investigations had been buried or quietly settled. Nothing ever made it to law enforcement, no arrest, no charges, just silence and transfer papers. When Leah read the report, her stomach turned. We failed these kids, she said quietly. Every single one of them. Back in Brookside, Evan Morales was making slow but meaningful progress. He still had nightmares, but now he talked about them in therapy. He drew pictures. He even asked his foster mom to sign him up for soccer when I get faster again. But one thing never changed. His bond with Axel. Every Tuesday and Friday, Leah brought Axel to see Evan. The boy would wait on the front porch, bouncing on his toes the moment the cruiser pulled in. And Axel, usually professional and calm, acted like a whole different dog around him. Tail wagging, ears perked, body wiggling with excitement. On one visit, Evan knelt beside Axel and said, "If I get scared again, I can talk to you, right?" Leah smiled. "You can talk to both of us, bud." Evan looked up at her and said something that stayed with her for days. "I don't think the bad man is gone." Leah crouched beside him. "Why do you say that?" "Because I still feel like I'm in the basement, even when I'm not." The breakthrough came from a bus station in Wichita, Kansas. A security guard recognized Harris from a Be on the Lookout flyer. Said the man came in every Thursday morning, same time, wearing a gray hoodie and gloves, always reading the paper but never boarding a bus. Leah and a small tactical team arrived early that following Thursday. Axel was suited up, ready, ears pointed forward like radar. They waited behind tinted windows in an unmarked van, watching. At 10:43 a.m., there he was. Same gait, same eyes. Even the mop of graying hair tucked under a cap couldn't hide the jawline. Leah had memorized from the photo board. "Target spotted," she whispered into her comms. Harris moved toward the bench. He sat, opened a folded newspaper. Didn't look around. He was calm, too calm, but Axel had already sensed it. He began to growl, not the bark of excitement or aggression, not even the controlled warning from the janitor's closet. No, this was the growl of recognition, of unfinished business. Leah stepped out of the van slowly, hand resting on her holster. "Harris," she called out. He didn't look up, but his hands tensed. "Don't do it," Leah said firmly. "We have eyes on you. My canine partner won't hesitate." He stood slowly, the paper dropping from his hand. "It wasn't supposed to be like that," he said flatly. "It never is." "Do you have the boy?" Leah paused. "He's safe. He's healing." There was a long silence. Then Harris turned toward her. "He remembers too much." That was when he reached into his jacket. But before Leah could even yell, Axel launched. The dog's training kicked in instantly. A perfect, controlled takedown. Jaws on the arm, pinning him without unnecessary injury. Just enough pressure to disarm. Officers flooded in. Harris was cuffed, searched, and read his rights on the spot. They found no weapon, just a stun gun, a fake ID, and a list of children's names in his pocket. Some of them were from Brookside. Others were not. Back home, Evan didn't celebrate when they told him Harris had been caught. He just sat quietly and asked, "Did Axel get him?" Leah nodded. "He sure did." The boy smiled. Just a little. Then he said something that made Leah's throat tighten. "Can I write him a letter?" "To Axel?" "Of course." The next time she visited, Evan handed her a folded piece of notebook paper. In shaky but brave handwriting, it read, "Dear Axel, thank you for not giving up. You didn't bark to scare me. You barked to tell people I was still there. I love you. Your boy, Evan. Evan Morales was learning how to live again. He brushed his teeth without being asked. He no longer flinched when footsteps echoed too loudly in the hallway. He played quiet board games with his foster mom. He laughed, genuinely, when Axel visited, but every time someone mentioned the courtroom, his shoulders tensed and his hands twisted in his lap. The trial date had been set. Randall Harris had pled not guilty. His defense was claiming mental instability and false memory implantation in the child, which meant only one thing: Evan would have to testify. His therapist was hesitant. "We don't want to re-traumatize him," she warned. "He's made so much progress." But the assistant district attorney, a composed woman named Danielle Price, made it clear. The jury needs to hear it from Evan, not just what happened, but how it felt. Harris counted on his silence. Evan's voice is what undoes him. Leah sat in the back of the meeting room with Axel at her side. Evan's foster mom, Mrs. Ritter, gently held the boy's hand. "Evan," Danielle said, kneeling to his eye level, "you never have to say anything you don't want to. But if you do, if you speak your truth, it can stop him from ever hurting another kid again." Evan didn't say a word, but his eyes shifted slowly toward Axel, who was laying down, tail quietly wagging. The dog looked back at him like he had all the time in the world. After a long pause, Evan whispered, "Can he come with me?" Leah raised her brows. "To court?" Evan nodded. "I can't talk without him. It took a week of paperwork and special requests, but the judge eventually approved it. Axel would be allowed to sit beside Evan on the witness stand. Not as a prop, not as a support animal, as a partner." The morning of the hearing, Leah picked them up in her cruiser. Evan wore a navy blue button-up and khakis. His hair had been neatly combed, but he kept touching it like he didn't quite recognize himself. In his pocket, he carried something tightly folded, a small letter he'd written to himself. "You are brave. You are safe. Axel is here." Axel sat upright in the back seat, his ears alert, watching the road ahead like he knew the importance of the day. As they pulled up to the courthouse, Leah turned and looked at Evan through the rearview mirror. "You okay?" Evan didn't answer immediately, then softly, "I'm scared, but not alone." Leah smiled. "That's more than enough." Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy, the kind of silence that hangs in places meant for consequences. Randall Harris sat at the defense table in a gray suit, looking smaller than anyone remembered. His hair was shorter, his eyes blank. But Leah didn't miss the way he twitched slightly when Evan entered the room. Axel was right beside the boy, walking in step like they were tethered by something more than a leash. The jury followed every movement. Even the court stenographer paused her typing when Axel gently hopped up and lay beside the witness stand, placing his head on Evan's foot. The judge gave a small nod. "Proceed." Danielle approached with care, her voice soft like she was talking to a child, not a witness. "Evan, do you remember what happened at school?" Evan nodded. "Was there a place Mr. Harris took you?" He swallowed. The closet." Danielle gave him time. "What was inside the closet?" "A door. It went down. To a room." "Was it your idea to go there?" Evan shook his head quickly. "No." Danielle leaned in. "Did Mr. Harris ever hurt you?" Evan's bottom lip trembled. He looked at Axel. The dog blinked once, calm as ever. Then Evan said, loud enough for every soul in that room to hear, "He hurt me by hiding me. He said no one would come, but Axel did." Gasps rippled in the back rows. One of the jurors covered her mouth. Evan gripped the arms of the chair. "I kept thinking, if I was quieter, maybe he'd let me go. But I didn't need to scream. Axel heard me anyway." Danielle took a step back. "Thank you, Evan. That's all." Then came the defense attorney, a tall man in an expensive suit with the kind of smile that felt more like strategy than warmth. "Evan," he began, "are you sure it wasn't just a game? Maybe you misunderstood? Leah's heart twisted. Evan flinched, but before the boy could answer, Axel suddenly sat up. Not barking, not growling. Just sitting, solid, still, like a statue carved from loyalty. Evan placed his hand on Axel's head. "I didn't misunderstand," he said clearly. "I was there, alone. I counted the days on the wall. I don't have to remember everything, but I remember enough." The courtroom went silent again. The defense attorney closed his folder. No further questions. Outside, the sun was warmer than anyone expected. Evan stepped down the courthouse steps holding Axel's leash. Reporters kept their distance. The district attorney wiped her eyes behind sunglasses. Mrs. Ritter hugged the boy close. "You were incredible." But Evan turned to Leah. "Did I help?" "You helped more than you know." Axel barked once, short and proud. Evan giggled for the first time that day. The jury took less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Randall Harris was sentenced to life without parole, no plea bargains, no reduced terms, and his victims, those who'd been too scared to speak, until now, finally began coming forward. Evan's testimony had opened the door. Weeks later, the town of Brookside held a ceremony at the local park. They unveiled a small bronze statue at the foot of the playground, a boy sitting cross-legged, head down, and beside him, a German shepherd with one paw gently resting on the boy's foot. A plaque beneath it read, "To the children who were found," and to the ones who found them. Leah and Evan stood in the front row. "Is that supposed to be me?" Evan asked, squinting. Leah nodded. And him? Axel, sitting beside them, let out a soft, happy grunt. Returning to Brookside Elementary wasn't part of the plan. Not for Evan, not for Leah, not even for Axel. But when the school invited them for a Heroes' Day assembly, it was hard to say no. The community had changed since Randall Harris's arrest and conviction. Parents were more involved. Staff underwent new training. Locks were updated, cameras installed, and the school board funded an emotional support program for trauma-informed care. Still, when Leah asked Evan how he felt about going back, he hesitated. "I don't want to go back to the closet," he said. "You won't," she assured. "You'll only go where you choose, and I'll be right beside you. So will Axel." He looked at the dog, who thumped his tail once without even lifting his head. Evan smiled. "Okay." The morning of the visit was crisp. Fall leaves painted the sidewalks in burnt orange and amber. Evan wore his blue jacket with Axel's paw print patch sewn on the shoulder. It was a quiet gesture, but he liked how it felt. Like a piece of Axel was protecting him even when they weren't touching. When they arrived, the school greeted them with applause. Kids clapped, teachers smiled through watery eyes, and the principal, Mr. Graham, welcomed Evan like he was coming home. "I can't thank you enough," Mr. Graham said, kneeling down. "Your strength changed everything here." Evan gave a polite nod but clung tighter to Axel's leash. Inside the auditorium, students held handmade posters. Axel the Brave, "Thank you, Evan," and one that simply read, "Silence doesn't mean gone." Leah sat behind the boy as the presentation began. The superintendent gave a speech. A school counselor talked about courage and healing. Then came Leah's turn. She stepped up to the podium, her badge catching the stage lights. "I'm not here today as a police officer," she began. "I'm here as someone who watched a child choose hope. And I'm here because a dog refused to stop barking." Axel barked once as if on cue, and the entire auditorium erupted in laughter and cheers. Evan even clapped. It was a beautiful moment, but it didn't last. It happened just after the assembly, when the school hosted a light breakfast in the courtyard. Teachers mingled. Students played tag in the open field. Leah kept an eye on Evan, who sat on a bench feeding Axel bits of sausage from his plate. Then Axel froze. Mid-bite. He lifted his nose, sniffed the air, and let out a low growl. Leah stiffened. She knew that sound. Not a warning, not a threat. A signal. Axel stood tense, His ears rotated. He turned toward the hallway that led past the gymnasium. Leah rose quickly. "Evan, stay here," she said gently, already clicking Axel's leash back on. Axel pulled her toward the rear hall. His stride was steady, driven. As they rounded the corner, Leah spotted a custodian cart, newer model, not the one Mr. Harris had used. But next to it, a door, slightly open, leading to the equipment storage area. "Axel," she whispered, unclipping the leash. He moved forward silently, nose low. Then he stopped. He barked. Once, twice. Leah pushed the door open. Inside, the light flickered. Rows of old sports gear lined the walls, and tucked in the far corner behind a stack of gym mats, a small girl, curled into a ball. The school went into emergency protocol immediately. Parents were alerted. Teachers corralled students into safe zones. Police units swarmed in within minutes. Leah carried the girl, barely 6 years old, into the nurse's office. She was trembling, her shoes untied, a smear of dirt on her cheek. Her name was Maya Johnson. She had gone missing just 10 minutes earlier during recess. "She told me she was looking for the nurse's office," a teacher explained later. "But I never saw her come back." Maya didn't say much, but she did tell one person what happened. Axel. Later that day, while sitting cross-legged on the floor beside the dog, she whispered, "He told me to come." The new janitor. The man's name was Dale Corman. He'd only been working at the school for 6 days. Background check had cleared. He'd worked night shifts before. Nothing on his record. But someone had missed a red flag. A sealed incident from out of state, dismissed due to insufficient evidence. He'd relocated, changed his name slightly, and passed under the radar again. But he didn't count on Axel. Corman was arrested that afternoon. In his car, a set of photos, ropes, candy wrappers, a journal detailing trial runs. He hadn't harmed Maya, but he'd been preparing. Brookside had nearly failed, again. That night, Leah sat on the back porch of the foster home. Axel rested beside her, breathing slow and even. Evan joined them with 2 mugs of cocoa, one slightly too full and spilling down his wrist. "I heard about the girl," he said softly. "Yeah. She's okay?" "She is." Evan sat beside Axel, scratching behind his ears. "He saved her too." "He did." They were quiet for a moment. Then Evan whispered, "Why does this keep happening?" Leah didn't have a perfect answer, but she spoke the truth. "Because some people are broken inside, and they find places to hide, but you—" She looked at him serious. "You are not broken. You are brave. And you're not alone." Evan leaned against her arm. "Axel doesn't let anyone hide." "No," she agreed, smiling. "He really doesn't." The following week, Leah received an official request. Would she and Axel join a statewide task force for school safety and child protection? They wanted her and her K-9 partner to visit schools, run training, and teach kids how to recognize warning signs. She said yes, and she asked if Evan could join them once in a while, if he wanted to. They agreed. Because healing is louder when it's shared, and sometimes the strongest voice in the room wears fur and growls when it matters most. The lights in the auditorium were brighter than Evan expected. Not stage lights, not like in a school play or talent show. These were sharp white conference lights, the kind that made your shirt feel more wrinkled than it actually was. He stood behind the podium, a dozen faces staring up from the audience. Principals, school safety officers, trauma counselors, even state legislators. Behind him, a large screen displayed his name in bold, Evan Morales. Advocate for child courage. To the side of the stage sat Leah in her patrol uniform. And beside her, as always, was Axel. Ears relaxed, tail resting on his paws like he had nowhere else to be. The plan was simple. Evan would share his story, not the whole thing, but the parts he chose. He'd practiced. He knew what to say. They, Even made cue cards just in case. But now, his hands were sweating. His heartbeat thudded in his ears louder than the microphone could ever project. "Hi, I'm Evan," he began, barely audible. He looked down at the cards. The words blurred. I was a kid at Brookside Elementary when..." His throat locked. His lungs forgot how to breathe, and the words simply stopped. From her chair, Leah felt the shift instantly. Evan's shoulders curved inward. His hands shook. She leaned forward but didn't stand. Axel did. Without a signal, without a cue. He simply stood up, walked across the stage, tail low, movement soft, and placed his head against Evan's knee. The crowd watched in silence. Evan looked down, blinked twice, and then knelt on stage beside the dog. He dropped the cue cards, rested both hands on Axel's back, and then he spoke. "When I was in the basement," he said quietly, "I didn't think anyone would find me. I thought I would disappear." Someone in the front row inhaled sharply. I was scared of sounds, of silence, of forgetting who I was. But Axel, he looked at the dog, eyes filled with something bigger than gratitude. Axel didn't bark for fun. He barked for me. He didn't need to see me to know I was in pain. He just felt it. The room was still. Nobody coughed. Nobody moved. Some people think kids are small, so their feelings are small too. But they're not. They're huge. We just don't always know how to say them. He ran a hand along Axel's neck. Axel didn't need me to explain. He stayed until I could talk. He stayed when I was afraid. He stays now, even when I'm strong enough to stand without him. He looked up at the audience, voice steady now. "If you work at a school and are with kids anywhere, please remember, if they go quiet, lean in. If they act angry, get curious. Don't wait for them to speak, just show up." A few people began to clap, then more, then everyone. Leah stood and wiped her eyes. Axel wagged his tail once and licked Evan's cheek like it was just another Tuesday. Later that afternoon, they sat under a tree outside the conference center. Evan munched on a bag of trail mix while Axel napped with his head in Evan's lap. Leah sipped a coffee and watched them, full of something that felt like hope wrapped in peace. "You were amazing up there," she said. Evan shrugged, chewing. "I forgot everything I was supposed to say." Leah laughed. "You said the part that mattered. Did I mess up? You made grown men cry. That's never a mess up." Evan looked down at Axel. I think he knew I was stuck. He always does. They sat quietly for a while. Then Evan asked, "Do you think I'll ever stop being the kid from the basement?" Leah didn't answer right away. "You might," she said eventually. "Or you might not. But you'll always be the kid who got out of it. That matters more." Evan nodded. Then after a beat he said, "I don't want him to ever retire." "Axel?" "Yeah." Leah smiled. "He's got a few years left in him, but even after that, he'll always be yours." Evan grinned. "Good." Months passed. Evan returned to school, a different school, one where he was just Evan, not the boy from the news. He made 2 friends, started art therapy, played goalie in soccer. Leah and Axel continued their work, now part of a growing network called the Silent Paw Project, created to support K-9 teams trained to work with trauma-impacted children. Their story spread. Schools invited them. Cities asked for training. And most importantly, kids saw something they never expected. Someone like them who wasn't afraid anymore. Not because he never felt fear, but because he learned how to face it. One day, Evan's therapist asked him to write a letter to his younger self. He took his time. Here's what he wrote. "You're going to think no one is coming, but someone is. He has fur. He doesn't talk, but he hears everything. Hold on, he's almost there." In life, we often assume that silence means peace, that no noise equals no problem, but sometimes silence is the heaviest sound of all. Evan's story reminds us that courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it shows up quietly, on four paws, with a growl no one expects. So next time someone pulls away or hides behind silence, ask yourself, what if the bravest thing they're doing is trying to be seen? What would you do if someone near you was quietly crying out without words? Would you be the one who heard them even if no one else did? Let's talk about it in the comments.